It's hard to see through a blizzard. Government uses the dog whistle mindless thugs to describe the people protesting the rape of a schoolgirl in Epping. President Trump says you're an idiot if you're still talking about child rapist Jeffrey Epstein. The pensionable age in the UK is to rise to 68 or perhaps 74. Afghans who helped the UK and whose names have been revealed to their enemies are brought to Britain with their extended families at the cost of billions by the government that cut cold weather subsidies to the elderly because it said there was no money. Men can be women and women can be men. If you question the government, you're a racist or an anti-Semite or an Islamophobe or a transphobe. Made up words for a made up world. Hard to see through a blizzard. Harder when you can't or can barely afford to feed your family or keep a roof over their heads. When the Prime Minister says there's loads of empty room for unchecked immigrants in a country where 1.3 million British families are on the waiting list for homes. Hard to see through a blizzard sold as harsh realities when so much of it is lies. And against that backdrop, a reasonable person, a reasonable, regular, tax-paying person with all the cares of the world on his or her shoulders, a reasonable person who somehow finds the time, the fleeting breathing space to lift his or her head up and glance at the bigger picture. That reasonable person might pause amid that blizzard and wonder how it is, why it is that other reasonable people like themselves can plainly see what is obvious, despite the clumsy dissembling of the powerful, can plainly see that the reasonable, ordinary, decent tax-paying people are, more and more of them with every passing day, seeing that, to coin a cliche, the tail wags the dog. If you're a US resident, let's face it, things feel uncertain right now. America's national debt, over $36 trillion and climbing. Inflation, still eating away at your savings. And the dollar, down nearly 8% this year, with more countries walking away from it. Meanwhile, the markets, one day they're up, the next day, trillions gone in a blink. So it's no surprise people are asking, where can I actually put my money and sleep at night? That's why more investors are turning to gold and silver. Gold's up over 24% this year, smashing records and soaring past $3,300 an ounce. And some analysts say we could see $6,000 gold before the end of Trump's term. And silver, it's heating up fast, driven by demand in tech, solar and defence. Some analysts say it could double in value this year. If you've been thinking about moving part of your IRA or 401k into gold or silver, tax and penalty free, our friends at Priority Gold make it simple. They're endorsed by Rich Dad's Robert Kiyosaki, ranked number 1 by Forbes and Financial Services Review, and trusted by thousands of everyday Americans. Right now, GB News viewers can get a free wealth preservation guide from Priority Gold. It shows you exactly how to add real gold and silver to your IRA or 401k tax and penalty free. Step-by-step plain English, no pressure, just smart information you can act on. Just scan the QR code, click the link in the description below, or if you're a US resident, text WEALTH to 24999. That's WEALTH to 24999 and claim your free guide today. The price of gold can go down as well as up. Past performance does not indicate future performance. Only invest what you can afford. We the people are the dog, hard beaten and neglected dogs, and the tail, the wagging tail, is the disgrace we have for administrations. I won't use the word government because administration is all they are supposed to be, while we, the reasonable people, are supposed to govern ourselves. That's democracy. And so we, the reasonable people, increasingly notice how it is that we see what is happening years before the administrations deign to admit what it is that we already know. Years ago, reasonable people like me, like countless numbers of reasonable people I spoke to and who wrote to me, knew the president of Ukraine, former comedian Volodymyr Zelensky, was corrupt, authoritarian. People like me talked about the Nazis of the Azov battalion, the same Nazis that were hosted and hailed in London by former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. We talked about Zelensky's authoritarianism, his crushing of the Orthodox Church, his corruption, how he was an affront to the very notion of democracy. We, the reasonable people, were vilified and ridiculed for saying as much. We were called Putin puppets and Putin apologists and the rest. And now, hundreds of thousands of deaths in war later, all those uncounted billions of dollars, pounds, and euros later, after all that, the so-called pillars of British journalism, the same that 2 years ago and up until yesterday were hailing and praising Zelensky and his regime as plucky underdogs defending democracy on behalf of all of Europe and indeed the Western world. Those media are now publishing pieces about what? Speak up. I can't quite hear you. Oh, yes. They're publishing pieces now about how Zelensky is a corrupt authoritarian. Now we, the reasonable people who knew as much years ago and said so, we suspect, or at least I suspect, because all of this is just my opinion, so I suspect this is happening now in the mainstream media, by the mainstream media, because someone somewhere has decreed it's finally time for Zelensky to go, no doubt to be replaced by some other puppet shaped for the next phase of whatever it is that's planned. But in any event, now the mouthpieces of the state, of the establishment, see fit to say what the reasonable people have been saying for years. Apart from anything else, it's downright embarrassing to watch. Do they not see, or do they simply not care that we, the reasonable people, remember what they published and broadcast then? And that we see so plainly and so clearly now that the time has apparently come when they can simply no longer deny the truth of what we, the reasonable people, were saying years ago. Again, it's only my opinion, just me saying this on behalf of me and no one else, but it's my opinion that it's all calculated and nakedly cynical. The mainstream media are publishing now what they've been told to publish now by their paymasters. They're publishing what they're publishing now about Zelensky the puppet because it's now time for something else. Out with the old, which is Zelensky and his cronies, and in with the new, whatever that is. For all that time lag, reasonable people who said what the mainstream media sees fit to say now were dismissed, shouted down, censored, cancelled, and otherwise bullied. Now, the things we said and for which we were bullied and censored are headlines in those same papers. We're still called conspiracy theorists. Now, don't get me wrong, say it once and say it loud. I'm a conspiracy theorist and I'm proud. But when we were called that by the mainstream media, it was supposed to be an insult. And now, that same mainstream media is reporting that Zelensky is authoritarian and corrupt. It's a cliche, but you have to say it. You couldn't make it up. On the other side of the Atlantic, Tulsi Gabbard is declaring that Russiagate, the litany of lies told by Democrats and the intelligence military complex about Donald Trump colluding with Russia in return for the keys to the White House, was a hoax. The Director of National Intelligence claims the intelligence community under President Barack Obama manipulated evidence to drive that hoax, that the Obama administration weaponized intelligence to lay the groundwork for what was essentially a years-long coup against Donald Trump. And so yet more that reasonable people knew and were talking about years ago and for which they were vilified, ridiculed, censored, shouted down, shut down, or utterly destroyed. Yet more reasonable people are being told now by so-called officialdom that what they knew and said then, what they were bullied for saying then, is the truth. And so I ask, how long will this go on? How long must we, the reasonable questioning people, reading and researching for ourselves, how long must it be the case that we must know and say the simple facts, the truth, in the face of the establishment and the establishment mainstream media trying to shout us down or worse? How long must we know and say it all before this farce comes to an end? The latest claim is that Epstein had no clients, meaning, as they claim, that those girls were trafficked to no one. The farce, I say, is this blatant and shaming time lag during which the truth is shouted down for the convenience of whoever stands to gain from the censorship. How long must we know that the obfuscation and bullying, How long must we know that the obfuscation and bullying coming out of the Trump White House now, in an ultimately doomed attempt to stop people knowing what they know, how long will we know and be bitterly frustrated and infuriated by knowing that the bullying and obfuscation is about protecting paedophiles at the highest levels of the establishment? How long will we know this and talk openly about this before someone in authority finally comes clean? It's hard to see through a blizzard, hard to keep your eyes wide open, but the pattern of behaviour is plain to see for those determined enough to do so. The reasonable people see and know and understand. They speak even if it means shouting into the teeth of a blizzard. And sooner or later, the mouthpieces of the establishment stop talking their sponsored nonsense narrative and admit what we, the reasonable people, have known all along. The message to the powerful is simple. Stop lying. We know you're lying. You know we know you're lying. It's only a matter of time before, anyway, you admit that what we knew then is the truth now. So give it up. And the message, the encouragement to the reasonable people is to keep peering doggedly through the blizzard so as to spot the next thing. The proxy war in Ukraine is running out of steam, or the steam to it is being cut off. Zelensky is the latest puppet whose time has evidently come, which means, I say at least, that the next hoax must be coming down the line, headed straight for us. Will it be terrorist outrages across Europe? Will it be a civil war? Will it be a global pandemic called by the World Health Organization? Will it be the war to end all wars? Eyes open, everyone. The next train is surely way past due.